The night sky over Sanctuary had not changed in 10,000 years. The same cold stars burned in the same positions. Watching the slow death of a world that had once been beautiful and green and full of life, now there was only gray. Dust covered the plains where forests once stood. And gray clouds blocked the sun for months at a time. And gray creatures called the Hollow crawled across the surface like a disease that would not stop spreading. Elder Priestess Selverth stood at the observation window of Velum Prime, the last great sanctuary of her people, and she watched the Hollow move in the darkness beyond the walls. They were always moving, always hungry, always patient. She had watched them for 300 years. Ever since she was young enough to still believe in the old prophecies. And in all that time, she had never seen them stop her people. The Valori were dying not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly and surely, like a candle burning down to nothing. There were perhaps 50,000 of them left, huddled inside the domed city of Velum Prime, protected by energy shields that grew weaker every year. Engineers said the shields would fail completely within 6 months after that. The Hollow would pour in like water through a broken dam. And the last of the Valori would join the billions who had already been consummate. Selverth should have felt something about this. Fear, perhaps. Or despair. Or at least a distant sadness. But she had lived too long and seen too much. All she felt now was tired. The ancient prophecies of her people spoke of the Ashkari, divine saviors who would fall from the heavens in chariots of fire when all hope was lost. For 10,000 years, her people had prayed for the Ashkari to come for 10,000 years. They had watched the sky and waited, and for 10,000 years, no one had come. Self no longer believed in the prophecies. She no longer believed in anything except the cold certainty that her people would die and that she would probably live long enough to see it happen. She turned away from the window and began the long walk back to her chambers. Behind her, something streaked across the sky. She did not see it at first. It was Keth, a young scout barely past her first century, who first spotted the light. Keth was supposed to be sleeping in the scout barracks. But she had never been good at following rules. She had climbed to the top of the eastern observation tower because she liked to watch the stars and pretend that somewhere out there, someone was looking back when the streak of fire tore across the darkness. She thought at first that her eyes were playing tricks on her, but then the fire grew brighter and the streak grew longer, and she realized that something was falling from the sky, not a meteor, something else, something that was trying to slow down, something that was trying to land. The object crashed beyond the walls, perhaps 3 kilometers into Hollow territory, and the impact shook the ground hard, enough that Keth had to grab the railing to keep from falling. Alarms began to sound throughout Velum. Prilori emerged from their homes and looked up at the smoke rising from beyond the walls, and they whispered to each other in voices filled with fear and wonder. Could it be? Was it possible? Had the Ashkari finally come? Keth did not wait to find out. She grabbed her scout pack and her breathing mask, and she slipped out through one of the old maintenance tunnels that only the scouts knew about. It was forbidden to leave the walls at night. It was suicide to enter Hollow territory alone, but Keth had spent her whole life hearing stories about the Ashkari, and she was not going to let them arrive without someone there to greet them. The surface of Sanctuary was cold and dead and covered in the gray dust that the Hollow left behind. Wherever they went, Keth moved quickly and quietly, using the rocks and the ruins of old buildings for cover, always watching for the telltale shimmer of Hollow movement in the darkness. She could see the crash site in the distance. Something was burning there, and the flames cast strange shadows across the dust. As she got closer, she began to see the shape of the thing that had fallen. It was a vessel of some kind. Though unlike any vessel the Valori had ever built, it was made of metal and glass and strange materials that Keth did not recognize much of it was broken and burning. But some parts seemed intact, and inside one of those intact parts, something was moving. Kath approached carefully, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had expected many things: divine beings of pure light, ancient warriors and celestial armor gods made flesh, come to deliver her people from extinction. What she found instead was a creature. It was smaller than a Valori, with strange proportions and soft-looking skin that had no protective scales or plates. It had hair on its head, something Kath had never seen before, and its face was covered in red fluid that seemed to be leaking from a wound above its eye. It was unconscious, trapped in some kind of harness inside the wreckage. Kath stared at it for a long moment, trying to understand what she was seeing. This was not the Ashkari of the prophecies. This was just a creature, injured and alone and very far from wherever it had come from. She should have left it there. She should have gone back to Velum Prime and reported what she had found and let the elders decide what to do. But then the creature opened its eyes. They were strange eyes, small and dark and filled with something that Kath did not expect. Not fernet confusion, just a calm, steady awareness. Like the creature was taking in its situation and already trying to figure out how to survive it. The creature looked at Kath. Kath looked at the creature, and then the creature made a sound. It was trying to speak, but the words meant nothing to Kath. Some alien language from some alien world, but the tone was clear enough. The creature was asking for help. Kath made her decision in that moment. She did not know if this strange being was the Ashkari or something else entirely. She did not know if bringing it back to Velum Prime would save her people or doom them, but she knew that she could not leave a wounded creature to die in hollow territory. She cut the harness with her scout knife and pulled the creature free from the wreckage. It was heavier than it looked, dense with muscle and bone, but Kath was stronger than she appeared. She got the creature over her shoulder and began the long walk back to the walls. They were halfway there when the hollow found them. Kath saw the first one rise from behind a pile of rubble, its biomechanical body gleaming in the starlight, its sensor clusters turning toward them with terrible precision. Then she saw the second one, and the third and the fourth. There were at least a dozen of them, forming a loose circle around Kath and the creature she carried. Kath had never faced so many hollow alone. She had never faced even one hollow alone. Her people were not fighters. They were survivors, hiders, runners. They built walls and shields, and they stayed behind them because that was the only way to live on a world ruled by the hollow. But running was not an option now, not with the weight on her shoulder, not with the circle closing around her. Kath did something she had never done before. She set the creature down gently on the ground, and she turned to face the hollow, and she raised her hands as if she was going to fight them. It was hopeless. Of course, she had no weapons that could hurt a hollow. She had no training in combat. She was going to die, and the creature was going to die, and no one would ever know what had happened to them. But she was not going to die running. She was not going to die with her back to the enemy if this was the end. She was going to face it. The first hollow lunged at her, and Kath closed her eyes, and then something happened that she did not expect. The creature behind her moved, despite its injuries, despite its obvious weakness. The alien being rose to its feet. It grabbed a piece of metal from the wreckage that Kath had been carrying in her pack, and it stepped in front of her, putting itself between Kath and the hollow. The creature made a sound, a strange, fierce sound that Kath had never heard before. Later, she would learn that humans called it a war cry. The hollow hesitated, just for a moment, just long enough for the creature to swing the metal shard and catch the first hollow across its sensor cluster. Blow should not have done anything. Hollow were armored, resilient, designed to shrug off far worse, but the creature hit it again and again and again, each blow faster and harder than the last. Driven by something that Kath could not understand, The hollow fell, the other hollow watched, their sensor clusters flickering with something that might have been confusion, and the creature turned to face them, blood running down its face. The metal shard raised and ready. It was not afraid, whatever this being was, wherever it had come from. Fear was not something it seemed to know. The hollow retreated. Keth could not believe what she was seeing in all the history of her people. She had never heard of hollow retreating from anything, but they were retreating now, melting back into the darkness, leaving Keth and the creature alone in the dust. The creature turned to look at Keth. It said something in its strange language. Then it collapsed. Keth caught it before it hit the ground, and she held it in her arms, and she stared at the darkness where the hollow had disappeared. She did not know what this creature was. She did not know if it was the Ashkari or something else entirely, but she knew one thing for certain: her people needed to see this. She lifted the creature onto her shoulder again, and she began to walk the gates of Velum Prime, where only a kilometer away she was going to make it. She had to make it because for the first time in her life, Keth believed that something might actually change. Yara woke up angry, not at the Valari, not at the Hollow, not even at the universe that had stranded her on this dying world. She was angry at herself. She had almost died in that nursery, fighting one single Hollow Scout, and she knew that if there had been two of them instead of one, those younglings would be dead. She was not strong enough. She was not fast enough. She was not prepared, and neither were the Velorith. This realization burned in her mind as she recovered from her injuries. She watched the Velori move through their daily routines, gentle and graceful and utterly helpless, and she understood for the first time just how doomed they really were. They had no weapons. They had no training. They had no instinct for violence of any kind. Their entire survival strategy for 10,000 years had been to hide behind walls and pray for salvation, and now the walls were failing, and salvation had not come, and they had absolutely no idea what to do. Yara knew what to do. She had spent her whole life learning what to do. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, or the fastest, or the most intelligent, but they were survivors. They had clawed their way up from the mud of a hostile world, fighting predators and disease in each other, and they had won. They had spread across their planet and then beyond it, always pushing, always fighting, always refusing to accept that anything was impossible. That was what humans did. That was what Yara was going to teach the Valori to do. She presented her plan to the council 3 weeks after the nursery incident. She stood before the assembled elders and explained, in her still imperfect Valori, what she wanted to do. She wanted to train them. She wanted to teach them how to fight, not like warriors, not like soldiers, but like survivors. She wanted to show them that they did not have to be victims, that they could push back, that they could make the Hollow fear them for a change. The council listened in silence. When she finished, Barth rose to speak. This is heresy, he said. Prophecies are clear that the Ashkari will save us. We are not meant to save ourselves. We are meant to have faith, to wait, to trust in the divine plan. What this alien proposes is not just dangerous. It is blasphemy. It suggests that we do not need the Ashkari at all. It suggests that the 10,000 years of prayer and faith and sacrifice were meaningless. I will not stand for it. He will not allow it. Half the council nodded in agreement. Yara watched them nod, and she felt something shift inside her. She had been polite since she arrived. She had been grateful and humble and careful not to offend, but she was done being polite. With respect, she said, her voice harder than the council had ever heard it. You have been waiting for the Ashkari for 10,000 years. They have not come in 6 months. Your shields will fail, and the Hollow will pour into this city, and every single one of you will die. Your younglings will die. Your elders will die. Your entire species will be wiped from existence, and no one will even remember that you existed. Is that what your prophecies promised you? Is that the divine plan you are so eager to trust? Silence total. Complete silence. No one had ever spoken to the council like that before, no. One had ever dared. Voreth's face flushed silver with rage. But before he could respond, Selveth raised her hand. The elder priestess had been quiet throughout the debate. Watching and listening with her ancient eyes now, she spoke. The alien makes a valid point. She said, I have watched our people die for 300 years. I have seen our cities fall one by one. Our population dwindle. Our hope fade to nothing. And all that time, the Ashkari have not come. Perhaps they never will. Perhaps the prophecies were wrong. Or perhaps, she continued, her gaze moving to Yara, the prophecies were right. But we misunderstood. Then we expected saviors who would fight for us. Maybe what the prophecies really promised was someone who would teach us to fight for ourselves. Voreth slammed his hand on the table. This is madness. He shouted, you would trust the fate of our people to this alien. This creature we know nothing about. For all we know, she's a hollow trick. A weapon sent to destroy us from within. Yara looked at Voreth with something like pity. I killed a hollow with my bare hands. She said quietly, I saved your younglings while you were sleeping in your chambers. What have you done? High priest, except pray to gods who are not listening. Voreth had no answer to that. The council voted. It was close. Much closer than Yara had hoped. But in the end, they gave her permission to try. She could train volunteers. She could teach them whatever she thought they needed to know. And if she succeeded, if she could show that the Valori were capable of fighting back, then perhaps the council would allow more. Yara started with 12 volunteers. Geth was the first to sign up. Of course, she was followed by a handful of young scouts and engineers, Valori who had seen enough death to question the old ways, who were desperate enough to try something new. Yara looked at her 12 students and felt the weight of an entire species on her shoulders. Training the Valori was the hardest thing Yara had ever done. They were not built for combat. Their bones were hollow and fragile. Their reflexes slow by human standards. Their instincts geared entirely toward flight and concealment. When Yara tried to teach them to stand their ground, they trembled. When she tried to teach them to strike, they flinched. When she tried to teach them to push through pain, they simply shut down, their bodies refusing to cooperate. After the first week, Yara wanted to scream. She had trained human soldiers, and she knew that even the weakest human recruit had more natural aggression than the bravest Valori warrior. But she was not trying to make them into humans. She was trying to make them into something else. She changed her approach. She stopped trying to teach them strength and started teaching them cleverness. She showed them how to set traps, how to create ambush points, how to use their environment as a weapon. She taught them that they did not have to be stronger than the hollow. They just had to be smarter. She taught them that every hollow had weaknesses, sensors that could be blinded, joints that could be jabbed, processors that could be overloaded. She taught them to think like predators, not prey. And slowly, painfully, something began to change. The 12 volunteers became 20, then 50, then 100. Word spread through Velam Prime that something new was happening, that the strange alien was teaching a new way of surviving. And more Valori came to watch and then to join. Voreth preached against her from the temple steps, calling her methods blasphemous and dangerous. But the young Valori listened. To Yara instead of Vorathi had seen too many of their friends and family die. They were done waiting for salvation that might never come. After 2 months of training, Yara decided it was time for a test. There was a hollow nest 2 kilometers from the walls, a breeding ground that had been producing scouts and drones for decades. The nest was too small to threaten Velam Prime directly, but it was a constant source of harassment, sending raiding parties that picked off anyone who ventured too far from the shields. Yara wanted to destroy it. The council was horrified. An offensive strike had never been attempted in Valori history. Their entire strategy was defense. Walls, shields. Hiding the idea of going out and attacking the hollow was unthinkable. But Yara convinced them. She pointed out that the nest was a test run, A way to prove that her methods worked. Before attempting anything larger, she promised that she would lead the strike herself, that she would not ask her students to do anything she was not willing to do. In the end, the council agreed. Yara selected 50 warriors for the mission. They moved out at night, slipping through the maintenance tunnels, armed with weapons that Yara had designed using Valori technology and human ingenuity. Kath was at Yara's side, her hollow bones trembling, but her eyes steady. They found the nest just before dawn. The hollow had not expected an attack. They were not prepared for ambush tactics, for coordinated strikes, for enemies who used traps and diversions instead of direct assault. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the nest was destroyed. More than 300 hollow lay dead. 11 Valori warriors did not return home. Yara stood among the burning wreckage and looked at the survivors. They were exhausted and terrified and covered in the gray dust of dead hollow, but they were also alive. They had fought and they had won, and they were alive. Kath walked up to Yara and said nothing for a long moment. Then she spoke. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. Yara nodded yes. She said, "We did, and this is just the beginning." The creature slept for 3 days. The Valori medics did not know what to do with it. Its body was completely alien to them, with organs in strange places, and blood that ran red instead of silver, and bones that were dense and solid instead of hollow and light. They did their best to clean its wounds and keep it hydrated, but they had no idea if they were helping or hurting. All they could do was wait, and while they waited, the rest of Velam Prime argued. High Priest Vorath stood before the council and declared that this creature was not the Ashkareth. Prophecies were clear. He said the saviors would be beings of light and divine power. They would descend in glory and sweep away the hollow with a wave of their celestial hands. This thing, this small and broken animal, was not what the faithful had prayed for. Was a test. Perhaps a trick sent by the hollow to deceive them, or maybe just a coincidence. A random piece of space debris that happened to contain an alien life form. Either way, Vorath argued, they should not allow it to remain in the city. It was dangerous, was unknown. Was not their savior. Elder Priestess Selveth listened to Vorath speak, and she said nothing. She had stopped believing in the Ashkari long ago, but she had also stopped believing in Vorath and his rigid interpretations of ancient texts. The truth was that she did not know what the creature was. No one did, and until they knew more, she saw no reason to throw it out to die. The council debated for hours, but in the end they reached no decision. The creature would be allowed to remain in the medical wing, under guard, until it woke up. Then they would decide what to do. Kath visited every day. She sat by the creature's bedside and watched its strange face twitch and move as it dreamed. Sometimes it made sounds in its sleep, words in its alien language that seemed urgent and distressed. Kath did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. The creature was having nightmares on the 3rd day. Its eyes open. Kath was there when it happened, and she watched the creature's gaze move around the room, taking in the unfamiliar walls and equipment, and the Valori guards standing by the door. The creature did not panic. It sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in its body, and it looked at Kath with those strange dark eyes. Then it spoke. The words meant nothing to Kath, but she recognized the pattern of speech. It was asking questions. "Where am I? What happened? Who are you?" Kath pointed at herself and said her name. The creature tilted its head, processing the sound, and then it pointed at itself and made a different sound. Yara, that was its name. Or at least what Kath thought was its name. Yara. The creature, Yara, spent the next several weeks learning to communicate. It was a slow and frustrating process for everyone involved. The Valori language was complex, with sounds that Yara's throat struggled to produce. And Yara's language was equally difficult for the Valori to understand, but Yara was determined. Kath had never seen anything work so hard at anything. Yara practiced from the moment she woke up until the moment she collapsed from exhaustion. And even in her sleep, she seemed to be processing what she had learned by the end of the first week. Yara could understand simple commands and questions by the end of the second week. She could respond with basic sentences by the end of the first month. She was having real conversations, broken and halting, but real. And as Yara learned to speak, the Valori learned what she was. She was human. She told them. From a world called Earth, she was the commander of a vessel called the Meridian, an exploration ship that had been traveling through deep space when its engines failed. There had been a crew of 47 people. Yara was the only survivor. She did not know how far she was from home. She did not know if anyone would ever come looking for her. She did not know if she would ever see Earth again, but she was alive. And that seemed to matter to her more than anything else. The Valori were fascinated by her and terrified of her in equal measure. She was wrong in so many ways. She barely slept, surviving on just a few hours of rest each night. When the Valori required 12 hours of hibernation, she ate constantly, consuming 3 times as much food as any Valori her size. She moved too quickly, reacted too sharply, and her emotions were visible and loud, and sometimes frightening. When she was happy, she laughed, a strange barking sound that made the younger Valori jump. When she was sad, she cried, water leaking from her eyes in a way that seemed almost painful. And when she was angry, her whole body changed, her muscles tensing and her face flushing red, and her voice rising to something that sounded almost like a growl. The Valori did not know what to make of any of it. They were a calm and measured people, their emotions carefully controlled and rarely displayed. Yara was the opposite of everything they valued. And yet, there was something about her that they could not ignore. She wanted to help from the moment she understood where she was and what was happening. Yara wanted to find a way to help the Valori survive. She asked questions about the hull, about the shields, about the technology that kept Willem Prime running. She examined their systems with an intensity that made the engineers uncomfortable, and then she started making suggestions. The shield generators were inefficient. She told them they were losing most of their power to heat bleed, wasting energy that could be used to extend the barriers. Lifespan. The Valori engineers had known about this problem for centuries, but they had never been able to fix it. Their ancestors had built the shields, and the knowledge of how they worked had been lost over the generations. Yara did not have ancestral knowledge. She had something else. She called it engineering. Within a week, she had figured out how the generators worked. Within 2 weeks, she had designed modifications that would reduce the heat bleed by more than half within a month, working alongside the Valori engineers who slowly began to trust her. She had extended the shield's lifespan from 6 months to more than 2 years. The council was amazed. Even Varth, who still insisted that Yara was not the Ashkari, could not deny that she had done something remarkable. But that was not what changed everything. What changed everything happened on a night when Yara was alone in her quarters, studying the shield schematics by the light of a small lamp. A hollow had slipped through a crack in the outer seal. It was just a scout, smaller than most, but it moved with the same terrible purpose as all of its kind. It made its way through the maintenance corridors, avoiding the guards. Following the scent of life, it found the nursery. There were 12 younglings inside, sleeping peacefully in their nests, too young to understand the danger that had entered their world. The hollow moved toward them, its feeding tendrils extending, ready to consume, and then it stopped because something had entered the room behind it. Yara had heard the screams. She had run through the corridors barefoot and half-dressed, following the sounds of terror, and she had arrived at the nursery just as the hollow reached the first youngling. She did not hesitate. She did not call for help. She did not run. She grabbed a metal support rod from a choke-rod collapsed shelf, and she attacked. The fight was brutal and short. The hollow was fast and armored, and designed to kill. Yara was soft and fragile, and bleeding from a dozen wounds within seconds, but she did not stop every time the hollow knocked her down. She got back up every time it cut her. She kept fighting. She fought like nothing the Valori had ever seen, with a ferocity that seemed to transcend pain and fear, and even the basic instinct for self-preservation strove the metal rod through the hollow's central processor and kept pushing until the creature stopped moving. Then she stood over its body, breathing hard, covered in her own blood. And she turned to look at the younglings. They were unharmed. Every single one of them was unharmed. Yara smiled at them, a gentle expression that seemed impossible on a face covered in blood. And then she collapsed. The guards arrived moments later, and they found the scene that would become legend. The human, small and broken and barely alive, lying in a pool of red blood, the hollow, dead at her feet, killed by nothing but a metal rod and bare hands, and the younglings, safe and whole, staring at the creature who had saved them with something like worship in their young eyes. One of the younglings spoke a single word. Ashkareth. Medics came and took Yara away, fighting to save her life, working through the night with their limited understanding of human biology. And while they worked, word spread through Velum Prime. The alien had killed a hollow with her hands. She had fought it alone, with no weapons and no armor and no training. And she had won. She had saved the children by morning. Everything was different. The Valori looked at Yara differently. Now they had seen her as a curiosity before, an interesting but irrelevant anomaly from the stars. Now they saw her as something else, a warrior, a protector, perhaps even a savior of Earth. Still insisted that she was not the Ashkari. And technically he was right. She was not a divine being of light. She was not a celestial warrior in golden armor. She was just a human, small and soft and easy to hurt. But she had done something that no Valori had ever done. She had fought a hollow and won, and that, Kat thought as she sat by Yara's bed and watched her sleep, was worth more than all the prophecies in the world. The return of the strike force changed everything. 50 warriors had gone out into the darkness, and 39 had come back. 11 Valori were dead. Their names added to the long list of those lost to the Hollow over the millennia, but 300 Hollow were also dead. And that had never happened before. The warriors marched through the gates of Velum Prime at dawn, carrying their fallen comrades, covered in dust and blood. And the city came out to watch them. Some of the Valori wept for the dead. Others stared in shock at the survivors, unable to believe what they were seeing. And some, the younger ones especially, looked at the warriors with something new in their eyes. Something that looked like Hope of Orth was waiting at the gates. He stood in his ceremonial robes, flanked by his most devoted followers, and his face was twisted with fury. "This is murder," he shouted, loud enough for the whole crowd to hear. "This alien has led our children to slaughter. 11 dead, 11 of our precious few. Sacrificed for what? For the glory of killing beasts, for the pride of this stranger, who does not even belong to our world." Yara stepped forward, still covered in the gray dust of battle. 11 dead, she agreed, her voice calm and steady, and 300 Hollow who will never kill again. 300 fewer enemies who will never breach your walls, never consume your younglings, never add to the mountain of corpses that your cowardice has created. Vareth's eyes widened. "You dare," he hissed, "you dare speak to me of cowardice? I have served the faithful for 500 years. I have kept the flame of hope alive when all seemed lost. You have done nothing." Yara interrupted. "You have hidden behind walls and prayed to gods who do not answer, have watched your people die and told them it was part of a divine plan. You have let fear rule you for so long that you have forgotten what courage looks like." The crowd murmured. No one had ever spoken to the high priest like this. No one had ever dared to challenge his authority so openly. Selva stepped between them before the confrontation could escalate further enough. The elder priestess said, her ancient voice cutting through the tension. "This is not the time or place for this debate. We will discuss what happened in the council chamber." As his Perperverath glared at Yara for a long moment, then turned and stalked away. His followers close behind Yara watched him go and felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. She had made an enemy today, a powerful one. The council met that afternoon, and the debate was fierce. Aerith demanded that Yara be expelled from Velum Prime, that her training program be shut down, that the Velori return to their traditional ways of faith and patience. Other council members disagreed. They had seen the warriors return, had heard the reports of the battle, had understood for the first time that fighting back was possible. They wanted Yara to continue, to expand her program, to train more warrior Selveth. Listened to both sides and made her decision. Yara would be allowed to continue her work, but she would not have the full support of the Council of Earth, and his followers would be allowed to practice their faith without interference. And those who chose to follow the old ways would not be forced to fight. The city would be divided, the elder priestess said, between those who followed Yara and those who followed Vorath. Both paths would be respected. Both would be allowed to continue. It was a compromise. Unlike most compromises, it satisfied no one, but it was enough. Yara threw herself into her work with renewed intensity. She expanded the training program, recruiting any Valori who was willing to learn. She worked with the engineers to develop better weapons, better armor, better tactics. She studied the Hollow, learning their patterns and weaknesses, building a knowledge base that would help her warriors survive, and she pushed herself harder than anyone else. She slept less than 3 hours a night. She trained with her warriors during the day and studied schematics during the night. She ate barely enough to keep herself functional, her human metabolism burning through calories faster than the Valori could provide them. Keth noticed the change first. "You are killing yourself," she said one evening, finding Yara alone in the engineering bay, surrounded by diagrams and blueprints. Yara did not look up. "I'm doing what needs to be done." Keth sat down across from her. "The Ashkari," she said slowly, "we're supposed to save us, but you are not trying to save us. You are trying to teach us to save ourselves, and you think that if you work hard enough, sacrifice enough, give enough of yourself, then maybe we will learn before you run out of time to teach." Yara finally looked up, and Keth saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of responsibility that she carried. "There are 50,000 of you left," Yara said quietly. 50,000 out of billions, and every day more of you die. To the Hollow, to old age, to despair. I do not have time to rest. Keth, I do not have time to take care of myself. Every hour I waste is an hour that could save someone's life. Keth was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Yara would remember for the rest of her life. "You are not just teaching us to fight," she said. "You are teaching us to hope, and hope is not something that can be forced. It has to grow on its own, in its own time. If you destroy yourself trying to plant it faster, then you will be gone before the harvest, and all your work will be for nothing." Yara stared at her. She had not thought of it that way. She had been so focused on the task, on the mission, on the desperate need to save as many Valori as possible, that she had forgotten that she was also part of the equation. She was mortal. She was fragile. She was burning out, and if she died, who would carry on her work? "You are right," she said finally. "I have been stupid." Keth smiled, a gentle expression that looked strange on her alien face. "Not stupid," she said, "just human." Yara laughed at that, a short, tired sound. "Yes," she agreed, "just human." She started taking better care of herself after that, sleeping more, eating more, letting others take on some of the burden she had been carrying alone. And as she stepped back, something wonderful happened. The Valori stepped forward. They took what she had taught them and made it their own. They developed new tactics, new weapons, new ways of fighting that Yara had never imagined. They formed their own command structures, their own training programs, their own traditions. They stopped being Yara students and started being warriors in their own right. The months passed, and the war continued. Velum Prime launched more strikes against hollow nests, each one more successful than the last. The shields, reinforced by Yara's engineering, held strong. The population stopped declining for the first time in centuries, and somewhere in the city, Vorath watched and plotted. He had not given up. He still believed that Yara was leading his people to destruction, that her methods were an abomination, that the only true salvation lay in faith and patience. He gathered his followers around him, the older Velori who were too set in their ways to change, the frightened ones who could not bear the thought of fighting. He preached to them every day, telling them that Yara was a false prophet, that her victories would turn to ashes, that the Ashkari would come and sweep away both the hollow and the heretics who had lost their faith. And in secret, he began to plan. He did not know exactly what he would do, but he knew that something had to be done. The alien had to be stopped. The old ways had to be preserved. The prophecy had to be fulfilled. He was the high priest. It was his duty to ensure that the divine plan was carried out, no matter the cost. And so the schism deepened, and the city divided, and two visions of the future prepared to collide. Yara knew that the conflict was coming. She could feel it in the way Vorath looked at her, in the whispers of his followers, in the tension that filled every council meeting. But she did not have time to worry about politics. She had a war to fight, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the walls, the Hollow Queen was waiting. 2 years had passed since Yara Chun fell from the sky. The world of Sanctuary had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible when she first arrived. Velum Prime was no longer just a sanctuary. It was a staging ground. The Velori had reclaimed 3 outlying domes that had been abandoned to the Hollow. Centuries ago, they had established supply lines and communication networks and forward operating bases. They had built factories that produced weapons designed by Yara and improved by Velori. Engineers, they had trained thousands of warriors, young Velori who had never known the old ways of hiding and waiting. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Velori were on the offensive, and for the first time in 2 years, Yara Chun was falling apart. She had hidden it well at first, a little more tiredness than usual, a slight tremor in her hands, occasional headaches that she dismissed as nothing important. But the Velori medics had noticed, and they had run tests, and they had discovered the truth: human bodies were not meant for this 2 years of combat stress. Minimal sleep, alien nutrition that was close to what she needed but never quite right, and the constant weight of responsibility had taken their toll. Her organs were struggling. Her immune system was failing. Her heart, that stubborn human heart that had kept beating through everything, was growing weaker with each passing day. The medics did not know how to help her. Human biology was still largely a mystery to them. They could see that she was dying, but they could not stop it. Keth found her one night on the observation platform, staring out at the stars. The young scout had changed over the past 2 years. She was a commander now, leader of the 1st Strike Battalion, one of the most feared hollow killers in Velori history. Her hollow bones were reinforced with artificial supports that Yara had designed. Her left arm had been replaced with a mechanical prosthetic after a battle 6 months ago. She was no longer the timid young thing who had dragged Yara through the dust. She was a warrior, but when she looked at Yara, she was still just Keth, the scout who had saved a strange creature from a crashed vessel and changed the world. "You are dying," Keth said. Not a question. Yara did not turn around. "Everyone dies, not you." Keth said, "Not yet. You cannot leave us yet. We still need you." Yara was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft and tired. "I used to dream about home," she said, "every night for the first year. I dreamed about earth-blue skies and green trees and the smell of rain. I dreamed about my family. My friends, my crew, I dreamed about the life I had lost. Kath moved to stand beside her, and now. She asked now. I dream about this, Yara said, gesturing at the observation window, at the city below. At the stars above, I dream about Velum Prime, about the younglings I saved in that nursery, who are nearly adults now, who have joined the warrior corps and fight with more courage than I ever had. Dream about the battles we have won and the battles still to come. I dream about what happens if I stop. Kath did not know what to say. You asked me once, Yara continued, why humans are the way we are, why we fight, why we refuse to give up, why we throw ourselves at impossible things. You never answered. Kath said, because I did not know how to explain it. Yara replied, but I think I understand now. She turned to face Kath, and there was something in her eyes that Kath had never seen before, something ancient and fierce and impossibly sad. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. Yara said, for 200,000 years. We fought for survival against predators that were bigger and stronger and faster than us. We fought against diseases that wiped out entire populations. We fought against each other. War after war after war. We even fought against our own planet. When the climate changed and the ice came and seemed like everything would die, and we won so completely that we forgot what it felt like to be prey. We spread across our world, and then beyond it, we reached for the stars because we could not accept that anything was beyond our reach, but we never forgot how to fight. It is in our bones. Kath, it is in our blood. It is in the dreams that wake us screaming in the night, even when we are soft, even when we are weak, even when we are alone on an alien world with nothing but a piece of metal in our hands. We fight because that is what humans do. That is all we know how to do. Kath felt tears running down her face. Silver trails in the starlight. That is what you taught us. She said no. Yara shook her head. I did not teach you anything you did not already know. I just reminded you. You have been hiding so long, so afraid for so many generations, that you forgot what you were capable of. You forgot that you could be something other than victims. I just showed you the truth. That was always inside youth. Two of them stood together in silence for a long time. Then Yara spoke. Again, the scouts have found something, she said, deep in hollow territory. At the center of the infestation, we think it is the Queen, the central intelligence that controls all the hollow on this world. Kath felt her blood run cold. The Queen was a legend, a myth, a story told to frighten younglings. If she was real, if she could be destroyed, then the hollow thread might end forever. But the center of the fight, the center of the might end forever. But the center of the hollow thread infestation was hundreds of kilometers away. Getting there would require crossing through the heart of hollow territory. It would be a suicide mission. You want to attack it? Kath said. It was not a question. Yara nodded. If we can destroy the Queen, we can end this war once and for all. The hollow will lose their coordination, their purpose, their drive to consume. They will become mindless beasts, easy to hunt down and exterminate. Sanctuary could be reclaimed. Your people could finally be free. And you, Kath said slowly, you know you will not survive the journey. Yara smiled, a sad and gentle expression. I was never going to survive. Kath, my body is failing. The medics give me 6 months. Maybe less. I can spend those months watching myself waste away, becoming a burden, waiting for the ender. I can spend them doing something that matters. I can give your people a chance at a future. Even if I'm not there to see it. Kath wanted to argue, to protest, to beg Yara to find another way, but she knew there was no other way, and she knew that Yara had already made her decision. When do we leave? Kath asked. We do not. Yara said, I am not asking anyone to come with me. This is my choice, my sacrifice. My Kath interrupted her. When do we leave? She repeated. Yara looked at her for a long moment. Then she laughed. A short surprise sound. You are as stubborn as a human, she said. Keth smiled. I had a good teacher. The planning began the next day. Yara briefed the council, explaining what she had found and what she proposed to do. She expected resistance, expected Vorath to denounce her plan as madness, expected the elders to refuse to risk any more lives on an offensive that might fail. She did not expect what actually happened. More than 2,000 warriors volunteered. They came from every battalion, every dome, every corner of Valori society, young and old, male and female, veteran and raw recruit. They lined up outside the council chamber and declared their willingness to follow Yara into the heart of darkness. And at the end of the line, wearing the simple robes of a penitent, stood High Priest Vorath. Yara stared at him, unable to believe what she was seeing. The High Priest who had denounced her, who had called her a blasphemer and a murderer, who had plotted against her in secret for 2 years, was volunteering for a suicide mission. I was wrong, Vorath said, his voice barely above a whisper. I have spent my life waiting for salvation, praying for divine intervention, refusing to accept that we might have to save ourselves, and in my arrogance, I nearly destroyed the very people I swore to protect. You are not the Ishkari of our prophecies. You are something the prophecies never imagined. Are the one who showed us that we could be our own saviors. I cannot undo the harm I have caused, but I can stand beside you in the battle to come. I can fight for my people, as I should have been fighting all along, and if I die, I will die with a weapon in my hands, facing the enemy, instead of on my knees, begging for a miracle that was never going to come. He knelt before Yara, the first Valari who had ever knelt before anyone. Forgive me, he said, and teach me to fight. Yara looked at the High Priest kneeling at her feet, at the 2,000 warriors waiting behind him, at the council members watching with wonder in their eyes. She thought about Earth, about her crew, about the life she had lost. She thought about the family she would never see again. And then she stopped thinking about the past. She reached down and took Vorath's hand, helping him to his feet. There is nothing to forgive, she said. We all do what we think is right. Now, let us do what is necessary. The army of Willem Prime began to march 3 days later. 2,000 warriors, more than had ever been gathered in one place in Valori history. They carried weapons that Yara had designed, an armor that she had built, and hope that she had ignited. They marched into the darkness, toward the center of the infestation, toward the queen who had plagued their world for 10,000 years. And at the front of the column, walking side by side, were an alien from the stars and a scout who had once saved her life. The long road back had begun. The march took 12 days, 12 days of moving through territory that no Valori had entered voluntarily in centuries, 12 days of fighting, of ambush, of desperate battles in the ruins of cities that had once held millions. The Hollow came at them in waves, sensing the intrusion, drawn by the scent of life and the promise of consumption. But the army pushed forward. They lost warriors every day, sometimes a handful, sometimes dozens. Each death was mourned, each body carried until it could be given proper rites, each name recorded so that future generations would remember the sacrifice Yara led from the front. As she always had, she did not sleep, she did not rest. She pushed her failing body beyond every limit, driven by a fire that the Valori had never seen in any creature. Keth stayed at her side, watching her friend deteriorate with each passing day. Ours hair had gone completely gray. Now her hands shook constantly. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. But she kept moving. She kept fighting. She kept leading. On the 8th day, they entered the Deadlands. This was the heart of the infestation, the place where the Hollow had first emerged 10,000 years ago. Nothing lived here except the Hollow themselves. The ground was covered in a thick layer of gray ash, the remains of countless consumed creatures. The air was thick with spores that the Valori had to filter through special masks. The sky was dark, blocked by clouds of hollow drones that circled endlessly overhead. It was the most terrifying place Kath had ever seen, and they had to march straight through it. The battles became constant. Hollow attacked without pause. Wave after wave of biomechanical nightmares. The Valori warriors fought with everything they had, using every tactic Yara had taught them, every weapon they had built, every ounce of courage they possessed, and still they died by the 10th day. They had lost nearly 500 warriors by the 11th day. The number had risen to 800 on the morning of the 12th day. When they finally saw the Queen's hive rising in the distance, only 1,200 remained. The hive was enormous. It rose from the deadlands like a mountain of chitin of metal, a structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It pulsed with a sickly light, and from its base, rivers of hollow flowed out in all directions. This was the source. This was the heart. This was where everything would end. Yara called a halt and gathered her commanders around her. Her voice was weak now, barely more than a whisper, but everyone listened. "We cannot take that thing by force," she said. "There are too many hollow, and we have lost too many warriors. If we try a frontal assault, we will be destroyed before we get within 100 meters. Then what do we do?" Morath asked. The high priest had fought bravely over the past 12 days. He had killed more hollow than any warrior except Keth herself. Whatever doubts he had once held about Yara's methods were long gone. "We divide our forces," Yara said. 3 groups too will attack from the flanks, drawing the hollow away from the main entrance. The third, a small strike team, will enter the hive and find the Queen. Everything depends on that strike team. Everyone knew what she was really saying. Everyone knew that the strike team would not be coming back. "I will lead the strike team," Yara continued. "No," Keth said immediately. "You can barely stand. You will die before you reach the entrance. Then I will die fighting," Yara replied, "which is better than dying in a bed somewhere, surrounded by medics who cannot help me. This is my choice." "Keth, this is what I came here to do," Keth wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. Yara had made her decision long ago, probably before they even left Velum Prime. The only thing Keth could do now was honor that decision. "Then I am coming with you," she said. Yara smiled, expected nothing less. The strike team was assembled, 20 volunteers, the best warriors in the army, each one knowing that they were walking to their death. They said their goodbyes to their friends and comrades, embraced their loved ones, spoke final words that they hoped would be remembered, and then, as the 2 flanking forces began their diversionary attacks, the strike team moved out. The entrance to the hive was guarded by hollow sentinels, massive creatures that towered over even the tallest Valorith. Diversionary attacks drew most of them away, but not all. The strike team fought their way through, losing 3 warriors before they even entered the hive inside. The hive was a nightmare. The walls were alive, pulsing with that sickly light, and the air was thick with the stench of consumption. Hollow drones crawled everywhere, drawn by the intrusion, converging on the strike team from every direction. They fought room by room, corridor by corridor, always pushing deeper into the hive. More warriors fell with each engagement. By the time they reached the central chamber, only 9 remained. The Queen was waiting for them. She was unlike any hollow they had ever seen. Her body filled the entire chamber, a vast mass of chitin and metal and organic tissue that seemed to have no beginning and no end. Thousands of cables connected her to the walls of the hive, pumping information and resources in both directions. At the center of the mass was something that might have been a face. Though it was difficult to tell, sensor clusters gleamed where eyes might have been. A vast opening served as a mouth. From that opening came a sound that none of them had ever heard before, a voice. "So," the Queen said, the words resonating through the chamber like thunder. "You are the creature that has been causing so much trouble. I have been watching you. Little Elieni have been studying you through the eyes of my children. You are fascinating, a species that refuses to accept the natural order, a Species that fights even when fighting is hopeless I have not encountered. Anything like you. In 10,000 years of consumption, Yara stepped forward, her body trembling with exhaustion, her lungs burning with every breath. She looked up at the vast nightmare before her and felt no fear, only determination. And you are the thing that has been killing these people for 10,000 years, she said. You are the reason they hid behind walls and forgot how to fight you. I'm the monster I came here to destroy, the queen laughed, a horrible sound that made the walls of the hive vibrate. Destroy me, she said. You can barely stand, your body is failing. You are dying even as we speak. What can you possibly do to hurt me? Yara reached into her pack and pulled out a device. It was small, no larger than her fist, and it glowed with a soft blue light. The Valari engineers did not know what it was. They had built it according to Yara's specifications, but they did not understand its purpose. Yara understood. She had spent months developing it in secret, using knowledge from Earth that the Valori did not possess. It was a bomb, not an explosive, not a weapon in the conventional sense, but something far more dangerous. It was designed to disrupt the electromagnetic fields that held the queen's biomechanical body together. It would tear her apart at the molecular level. It would destroy everything within a kilometer radius, including Yara, including everyone else in the chamber. You would kill yourself, the queen said. And Yara heard something new in her voice, something that might have been fear. Just to destroy me, Yara smiled. That is what humans do, she said. We throw ourselves at impossible things. We refuse to give up. Even when giving up is the only sensible option, we fight, and we die. And we take our enemies with us. It is not rational, it is not logical, it is just who we are. She raised the device, and then Keth stepped forward and took it from her hand. What are you doing? Yara demanded. Keth looked at her with those strange alien eyes, and Yara saw something there that she had never seen before. Love, not romantic love, not the love between partners, but something deeper. The love of a student for a teacher, the love of a daughter for a mother, the deep love of a species for the creature who had saved them. You taught us to fight, Keth said. You taught us to hope. You taught us that we could be our own saviors, but you never taught us to sacrifice. You never let us take that burden from you. This time, it is our turn now, Yara said. Reaching for the device, Keth stepped back, beyond Yara's reach. Run, she said to the other warriors. Get her out of here. Tell our people what happened. Tell them that we died fighting, that we died for them, that we died with courage. Go now. The warriors grabbed Yara and dragged her toward the exit. She fought them, screaming, reaching for Keth. But they were too strong, and she was too weak. The last thing she saw before they carried her out of the chamber was Keth facing the queen, the device held high, her body trembling, but her eyes steady. Goodbye, teacher, Keth said, and then there was light, and then there was nothing. The sky over New Velam was blue. It had been blue for nearly 1,000 years now, ever since the ash clouds finally cleared, and the sun returned to sanctuary. The world had changed beyond all recognition. Forests covered the plains where dust had once ruled. Rivers flowed through valleys that had been dead for 10 millennia. Cities rose where ruins had crumbled, and the Valori had changed too. They were no longer the fragile, frightened creatures who had hidden behind walls and prayed for salvation. They were explorers now. They were builders. They were warriors who feared nothing. They had reclaimed their world and then looked beyond it, reaching for the stars that had once seemed so impossibly far. Their ships traveled between planets, carrying trade and knowledge and hope to distant worlds. They had joined a galactic community of species, respected and admired by all who knew their story. And at the center of New Velam, in the heart of the city that had risen from the ashes of Velam Prime, stood a statue. It was not a statue of a divine being. It was not a statue of a celestial warrior in golden armor. It was a statue of a human woman. She was small. By Valori standards, her skin was smooth, without scales or plates. Her hair was carved in careful detail, flowing around a face that was soft but determined. One hand was raised in a fist. Beneath the statue was an inscription in both Valori and a language called English. The legend spoke of saviors falling from the sky. They were wrong. What fell from the sky was a teacher, a warrior. Friend, she did not save us, she taught us to save ourselves, and that was greater than any prophecy. Every year on the anniversary of the final battle, young Valori gathered at the base of the statue to hear the story. It was a tradition that had begun shortly after Yara's death and had continued unbroken for 1,000 years. The storytellers changed. The details shifted slightly with each telling, but the core of the story remained the same. Once, long ago, a creature fell from the sky. She was not what the prophecies promised. She was something better. A young Valori named Keleth sat in the crowd, listening to the story with wide. The explosion lit up the sky for 100 kilometers. Every hollow on the battlefield stopped moving at the same instant. Their connection to the Queen severed forever, and then they began to die, not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly and surely as the intelligence that had given them purpose faded away. Some collapsed where they stood, their systems shutting down. Others wandered aimlessly, no longer knowing what they were supposed to do. A few attacked the Valori warriors who were still fighting, but without coordination, without purpose. They were easy to destroy by nightfall. The battle was over. The Hollow were finished. 10,000 years of terror, of consumption, of slow extinction, ended in a single flash of light, and Yara Chun lay unconscious in a makeshift medical tent, surrounded by warriors who did not know if she would ever wake up. She had fought the other survivors all the way back to the army's position, screaming Keth's name, trying to go back, trying to die with her friend. They had to sedate her in the end. It was the only way to stop her from killing herself. Now she lay still, her breathing shallow, her heartbeat weak, her body finally giving up the fight it had been waging for 2 years. The medics did what they could. They stabilized her vital signs, treated her injuries, kept her alive through the night, but they knew, as everyone knew, that Yara Chun was dying. There was nothing they could do to stop it. Varath sat beside her bed throughout the night. The high priest, who had once called her a blasphemer, who had plotted against her, who had tried to destroy everything she built, now kept vigil over her like a devoted disciple. He prayed, not to the gods of the old prophecies, but to something new. He prayed that Yara would wake up. He prayed that she would live long enough to see what she had accomplished. He prayed that the universe would give her just a little more time in the morning. Yara opened her eyes. "Where is Keth?" she asked. Her voice barely a whisper. Varath looked at her with sorrow in his ancient eyes. "Gone." He said, "She destroyed the Queen. She saved us all." Yara closed her eyes, and tears ran down her face. She should not have done that. She said, "It should have been me. It was her choice." Varath replied gently, "Just as fighting was your choice, just as sacrifice was always your choice, she learned from you." Yara, she learned that some things are worth dying for. Yara said nothing. She lay there in silence, weeping for the scout who had saved her life twice now, the friend who had become something like family, the warrior who had taken the burden of sacrifice from her shoulders. She wept for a long time, and then she stopped because there was still work to do. The army began the long march back to Velam Prime. 3 days later, they had lost nearly 900 warriors in the assault on the hive. They had won. The surviving soldiers carried Garfarum with them, wrapped in white cloth. Honored and mourned, Yara walked at the front of the column, refusing the litter that the medics wanted her to use. She was dying. Everyone knew it, but she would not die lying down. She would die on her feet, walking beside the warriors she had trained. They reached Velam Prime on the 20th day. The city had heard the news long before they arrived. Scouts had run ahead, carrying word of the victory, and by the time the army reached the gates, the entire population was waiting. 50,000 Valori lined the streets. Watching the warriors march in, they did not cheer. The Valori were not a species that cheered, but they did something that had never been done before. They bowed every single Valori in the city, from the youngest youngling to the oldest elder. Bowed as the army passed. They bowed to the warriors who had fought. They bowed to the fallen who had died, and they bowed to Yara-chan, the alien who had fallen from the sky, and taught them how to save themselves. Yara walked through the bowing crowd, and she felt something she had not felt since she crashed on this world. She felt at peace. She had done what she came to do. She had given these people a chance. They would survive now. They would rebuild. They would reclaim their world and reach for the stars. She had done enough. Selveth met her at the steps of the council chamber. The elder priestess looked different now. There was light in her eyes that had not been there before. There was hope. You did it, Selveth said. Yara shook her head. We did it. She corrected all of you. She just showed you the way. Selveth smiled. The prophecies spoke of the Ashkari. She said saviors who would fall from the sky when all hope was lost. We expected divine beings who would destroy our enemies with celestial fire. Instead, we got you. She reached out and took Yara's hands. You are not what the prophecies promised. She continued. You are something better. You did not save us. You taught us to save ourselves. And that, Yara-chan of Earth, is the greatest gift anyone has ever given us. Yara felt her legs giving out. The exhaustion, the grief, the physical damage to her body, all of it was catching up with her at once. She would have fallen if Vorith had not caught her. Easy, the high priest said, lowering her gently to the ground. You have done enough. Rest now. Yara looked up at the faces surrounding herself. Vorith, the warriors who had fought beside her, the younglings who had grown up hearing stories about her. They were all there. They were all watching. They were all grateful. I want to see the sky, Yara whispered. They carried her to the observation platform, the same place where she had stood so many times, looking out at the stars. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and gold for the first time in 10,000 years. The sky was clear. The ash clouds were beginning to dissipate in a few years. Sanctuary would see blue skies again. It is beautiful, Yara said. Yes, Selveth agreed. It is. Yara looked at the sunset, and she thought about Earth. She thought about the blue skies and green trees, and the smell of rain. She thought about her family, her friends, her crew. She had lost all of them. She would never see Earth again, but she had found something else. She had found a purpose. She had found a people. She had found a home. I am glad I crashed here, she said, and there was a smile on her face. I am glad I met all of you. I am glad I had the chance to help. The Valori gathered around her, holding her hands, touching her shoulders, showing their love in the only way they knew how. Yara closed her eyes. She took one last breath, and Commander Yara-chan of the UNSS Meridian died. As the sun set over a world she had saved, the Valori did not let her body touch the ground. They held her up, cradling her gently. Mourning the alien who had become one of them, Selveth spoke the words that would be carved on monuments for 1,000 years. She came from the stars. The elder priestess said she fell from the sky when all hope was lost. She was not what the prophecies promised. She was something better. She taught us to fight. She taught us to hope. She taught us to save ourselves, and we will never forget her. They buried Yara-chan on a hill overlooking Valem Prime, in a spot where she could see the stars. They marked her grave with a simple stone, carved with words in both Valori and English. Here lies Yara-chan. She fell from the sky. She taught us to rise.